There are things every man holds on to, not because they serve him, but because they once made him feel safe. The image of who he thought he had to be, the ache of a wound left unattended, the anger he wrapped around himself like armor, the expectations of a world that never asked what he truly wanted. Over time, these things become heavy, but because we've carried them for so long, we confuse them with who we are. The ancient Chinese philosophers understood something most of us forget. Letting go is not loss, it is return. Not to who we were before the pain, before the roles, before the striving, but to who we've always been beneath them. Laozi said, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." It sounds like a paradox, but it is a quiet revolution. In releasing the image, we uncover the essence. In surrendering control, we step into trust. In grieving what no longer fits, we create space for what finally does. Letting go is not a one-time act. It is a process. Sometimes it begins with small things, a job that drains you, a friendship that no longer breathes, a version of success that feels hollow. Other times, it asks for something deeper, an apology you never received, a father who never said he was proud, a story you've told yourself about why you are unlovable. These things are not easy to release. They have shaped us, but we must ask, are they shaping us toward freedom or away from it? The man who cannot let go becomes rigid. He resists change, clings to pain, and builds his identity around what hurts. But the man who chooses release is not weaker, he is braver. Because to let go is to face the grief of what might have been and still move forward without resentment. It is to love without needing to possess. It is to trust that what is meant for you cannot be taken, and what is taken was never truly yours to begin with. Often, we do not let go because we fear the emptiness it might leave behind. But the sages knew emptiness is not absence, it is possibility. Only in emptiness can something new be born. Only in that open space can the self you buried under expectations begin to breathe again. So if something in you feels tight, if life feels like it's asking you to shed a layer, listen to that. It is not punishment, it is invitation. Letting go is not the end, it is the beginning. The beginning of returning to the man you were before the world told you who to be. And in that return, you may find not only relief, but a quiet kind of wholeness that has been waiting all along. There are things a man can never take back. One of them is the weight of a word spoken in haste. Long after tempers cool and people forget the details, they will still remember how you made them feel. Words shape the unseen architecture of relationships. They either build bridges or burn them. They can heal a wound or create one that never fully closes. Ancient Chinese philosophers knew this truth well. They understood that speech is not just sound, it is power. And that power, once released, takes a shape in the lives of others. A careless word can live for decades in someone else's mind. A cruel sentence uttered in frustration can become the seed of someone else's insecurity. But the reverse is just as true. A kind phrase spoken with sincerity can echo within a heart long after the speaker has forgotten it. That is the quiet responsibility of being human. Every day, with every word, you are shaping more than just conversations. You are shaping people's sense of safety, dignity, worth. Laozi once taught that what is soft can overcome what is hard. There is nothing softer than language, and yet there is nothing that penetrates more deeply. Men are often taught to be stoic with their feelings, to hold their emotions behind silence or sarcasm. But silence isn't always wisdom, and sarcasm isn't always harmless. Words matter, not because they are elegant or poetic, but because they reveal what we choose to honor in ourselves and in others. We often speak most recklessly to the ones we love because we assume they'll understand. But love is not sustained by assumption. It is built word by word, day by day, in the quiet choices we make, to be gentle when we are tired, to speak honestly when it's easier to withdraw, to listen not just to reply, but to understand. The words you say to yourself are no less powerful. What you tell yourself in the privacy of your own thoughts becomes the lens through which you see the world. If you are always criticizing yourself, always questioning your worth, that energy leaks into how you show up for others. You cannot offer kindness outwardly when you have none inwardly. Speak to yourself with the same compassion you would offer to someone you love. The sages did not speak much, but when they did, they meant every word, because they knew speech was not a way to fill silence, but a way to honor it. And perhaps that is the invitation for every man, not to speak more, but to speak better. To use your voice not to control, but to connect. Not to prove, but to express. Not to impress, but to reveal something true. Because in the end, your words will outlive you. Let them be gentle enough to remember and strong enough to matter. There is a moment, often quiet and unnoticed, when a man begins to question why he is carrying so much, not just in his hands, but in his mind, in his schedule, in his home, and in his heart. The noise of ambition begins to fade, and in its place rises a softer, more persistent voice asking, do I really need all of this? It is not a question born from defeat, but from awakening. The ancient Chinese philosophers revered simplicity not as a lack, but as a virtue, one that brought a man closer to truth. Laozi wrote, "He who knows that enough is enough will always have enough." In a world that glorifies accumulation, this wisdom can sound almost radical, but it is in simplicity that a man begins to see clearly. Not because the world changes, but because he finally stops clouding his vision with excess. We are taught that success is about more money, more tasks, more connections, more accomplishments. But with each new thing we chase, we often give something up. Time with loved ones, the calm of an uncluttered mind, the energy to savor what we already have. We confuse complexity with significance, but the most meaningful things in life are rarely complicated. A quiet morning, a sincere conversation, a walk without a destination. Simplicity is not about denying yourself pleasure. It is about no longer needing to prove your worth through possessions or pace. It is choosing to keep only what matters and releasing what does not. It is the bravery to say no, to let go, to trust that having less can sometimes bring more peace, more presence, and more purpose. Many men spend the first half of life building towers of status, wealth, and reputation, only to realize in the second half that they long for the quiet of a small, steady home. Not because they failed, but because they finally saw clearly. The weight of more eventually becomes a burden, and simplicity becomes not just attractive, but necessary. Simplicity also returns a man to himself. It removes the distractions that once shielded him from his own questions. Who am I when I am not working? What do I love when no one is watching? What makes me feel most alive when there's nothing left to chase? These are the questions only silence and space can answer. To embrace simplicity is to reclaim your time, your energy, your attention. It is not a retreat from life, but a deeper arrival into it. It is not about living with less. It is about living with less noise, less pressure, and less distance between who you are and how you live. When you strip away what is non-essential, what remains is not emptiness. What remains is what was most essential all along. And in that space, you don't feel lacking, you feel free. True leadership is not found in the echo of commands, but in the quiet example a man sets when no one is watching. As boys, we're taught to lead by being strong, by knowing answers, by stepping ahead. But the older we grow, the more we see people do not follow authority, they follow authenticity. And the most powerful leaders are often those who walk behind, not in front. Laozi once said, "To lead people, walk behind them." At first, it sounds like a contradiction, but the truth is simple. Simple. Leadership is not about elevation, it's about service. It's about understanding before insisting, listening before leading, supporting without demanding recognition. When you walk behind someone, you see where they stumble, where they hesitate, and where they shine. You become their mirror, not their master. Many men chase titles, boss, father, mentor, with the belief that authority grants them respect. But respect is never given by a nameplate or a role. It is earned in the smallest moments, how you hold space for someone's truth without judgment, how you show up when no applause awaits, how you model discipline without resentment and humility without shame. In those quiet acts, trust is built, influence is born, and leadership becomes legacy. A true leader is never the loudest in the room. He is the one others turn to when everything else becomes noise. Not because he has all the answers, but because his presence reminds them they'll find their own. His steadiness becomes a compass. His example, a quiet invitation to rise, not by force, but by choice. This kind of leadership demands inner work. It requires you to befriend your own shadows before you guide others through theirs. You cannot teach patience if you are ruled by your temper. You cannot encourage vulnerability if you fear your own wounds. You cannot ask others to grow if you refuse to evolve yourself. And perhaps most importantly, leadership is not about perfection, it is about presence. To be there when it's inconvenient, to admit when you're wrong, to model what it means to repair, not just succeed. Your children won't remember every lesson you tried to teach them, but they will remember how you treated them when they failed. Your team won't quote your speeches, but they'll remember whether you stood by them when things went wrong. The man who walks behind leads by love, not leverage. He inspires not by being above, but by being among. And in doing so, he teaches that leadership is not about control, it is about connection. A hand extended, a heart available, a life that shows others it's possible to be both strong and soft, wise and humble, powerful and kind. In the end, the greatest leaders don't leave followers behind them. They leave better leaders in their place. We spend half our lives building an identity like armor, titles, possessions, pride, certainty. But life, in its wisdom, eventually invites us to set it all down. Not to lose ourselves, but to finally meet who's been waiting underneath. When you loosen your grip, your hands become open, ready to hold truth, to offer kindness, to lead without forcing. Your words become softer, but stronger. Your presence, once hurried, becomes a refuge for those you love. Simplicity reveals the sacred. Humility becomes your power, and leadership becomes the quiet act of walking beside, not ahead. In letting go, you don't become less, you become whole, and in that wholeness, others finally feel safe enough to follow.